Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
Hey, we're back with the Maryland Crabs Podcast. How are you? This is John Frenay and Tim
Hamilton, and we're doing this is a drinking podcast.
Here we go. We got the beers. Cheers.
Cheers.
And that third voice you heard?
Oh, I'm Sean O'Neill.
Yeah, everyone knows Sean. Sean's the man around town. So Sean is going to join us. First of all, they're going to be relieved that we're not talking about crime because we have beat that dead horse.
Right. We're going to beat it a little bit more, maybe, but some people have suggested that we talk about the business climate.
We're going to cleanse the palate. This is the sorbet. This is the sorbet podcast. That's the episode.
There you go. Okay, that'll work.
So we're going to talk about business. I think we're all kind of on the same page. But first of all, Sean, tell us a little bit about yourself for everyone who's listening.
Let's see. I'm an Aquarius. I like long walks on the beach.
Swipe right or left. I'm not sure which way it goes.
That's all Grindr. After my time.
This isn't Grindr.
So let's see. I am a financial planner for a firm, and I was the president of the Annapolis Business Association, so I know quite a bit about the inner workings of the business climate here in Annapolis, and then led that through the merger to the Annapolis Partnership, which is now the Downtown Annapolis Partnership.
All right, we'll get to that, I think, because that's going to be, we have a few topics that we just kind of want to pull apart.
Sure.
But I think my problem is, and I was thinking about this when I was watching the city council meeting the other night, is I was watching, we were talking about the forestry plan that was filed, the Forestry Conservation Act.
The Forest Conservation Act that Jared Levin sponsored.
Passed, right. And one thing that kind of got me, it was passed unanimously, but it was Sheila Finlayson, and she had said at one point going, well, I guess I'm representing the business interests when it comes to the Forest Conservation Act. And I thought to myself, that was odd, because I've never thought of Sheila as pro-business per se. I've seen her as pro-development. And we were talking about that before. John's like, well, you can't support, because I'm a big business advocate. He goes, but you can't separate business from development, because I think the line of thinking I always had, when I think of business, I think of restaurants, I think of T-shirt shops, I think of all the downtown businesses. And that's the other thing too. We always think downtown. We never think West Street. We never think Forest Drive. But that's just
in the forgotten West Annapolis.
Exactly. That's what, as Annapolitans, we tend to do. But I never think about the developers. So I see the business owners as these people who work hard, that they get up, they're trying to survive. And when I see the developers, not that I'm anti-development, but I kind of think of, oh, well, they're slipping through the system because they know that the people who they're supposed to have advocate for them. But I mean, am I wrong in thinking about that when we're talking about business? Is it that entirety of it? It's
development is business too. I mean, it's just bigger business than the T-shirt shop.
But my issue with development is that, and because I think about Crystal Spring, and I think about Rocky Gorge, where I hear the developers say, well, it's way too hard to do business here. If you're a developer, it should be a little bit hard, right? Because you have to live with that for 20, 30, 40 years. Whereas if a business opens and they don't make it, then they're gone, and there's no harm, no foul, right?
Right. And well, there's two different kinds of developers, too. You have commercial developers or residential developers. Mm-hmm. And residential developers, even though it's a business, that's a temporary business because eventually it'll be residents in there. But a commercial developer, they're going to have a far greater effect on the economy as far as business goes by putting some sort of business in that place for an extended period of time. So I think you're right. You do have to kind of look at it one way or another to some extent, but some of that has an extension beyond just the development phase, if that makes sense. So some have a more of a staying effect than some developments do than others.
Well, I try to be honest with myself, and that is whenever I see a business in downtown that they're trying to open, they're trying to extend the hours for alcohol, serving alcohol, and you always have word one that no matter what happens, they're going to be up in arms, and I roll my eyes, and I'm like, well, that's part of business, you live down there. But then if I'm looking at Crystal Spring or any other development, the Preserve It, Quiet Waters, then all of a sudden I turn into a Ward 1 where I'm like, oh, wait, I got to drive on Forest Drive. And, so I think it's all, I think it's all kind of perspective at that time. It's
NIMBY Tim.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, that to an extent. But all things being equal, let's say, I don't know if is it any more difficult to be a developer of commercial or residential than it is to be a regular business owner in town?
Probably, because you have far more permits you have to pull, far more issues that are gonna hit you from different directions, from the residents, from the businesses, from the city, elected officials. And so I think when you look at it I look at it from a hassle standpoint. Is it easier to build a building in Annapolis, or is it easier just to walk into a building and turn it into a new shop? And if building a new structure in Annapolis is going to be a massive headache, then clearly that's going to be a bigger hassle.
Do you think it's any worse, though? Do you think it's any worse to build? I mean, again, you're just looking from the outside in, where you say all of a sudden there's a building that, you have the whiskey, it's gone, and now there's a Taco Bell, and you're just thinking, oh, that was quick. But I mean, you don't see the behind the scenes.
That was the mayor's uncle.
Yeah. Okay, well, all right, now hold on.
That's a really poor example.
But that's a good question. All right, so let's say this is not a small. I heard someone once, about 5 years ago, open a restaurant. And I mentioned this before, and they opened a restaurant down on City Dock, and they said that they've opened up restaurants between Richmond and Boston and every metropolitan in between, and they've never ever come across the red tape and obstructionism that they have in Annapolis.
I heard the exact same story when talked to the general contractor with Morton's, which was at the Westin, and that was precursor to the Annapolis Grill, I think is what it was called, which is now just ballroom space for the Westin. And he said that he had built 60 Mortons worldwide. And they're all the same. I mean, let's face it, they're a cookie cutter. Right. They know exactly what to do. And it's a contractor that's, they're doing it as efficiently as can, but they're not cheating. But he said the city is not corrupt. He says, but they are so dysfunctional. He says the fire marshal comes in and says, hey, I need that wall painted blue. And they paint it blue. And next thing, the electrical inspector comes in and says, what the hell is that painted blue for? It needs to be a red wall.
Well, I think because if you compare the administrations, let's just go back a couple, Moyer and then Cohen and now Panelides, and let's take relatives out of the equation just to make it fair. It doesn't matter. I have not seen a pro-business administration since I've been. I was on the ABA board for 7 years.
I don't know that it's not a pro-business administration. I just think that, and Mike Carter, who we used to do some marketing with the Market House. He runs like some of the ghost tours downtown. He has a great concept. He says that the city is just stuck on no.
Yeah, but
he says it's much easier to sit there and say, hey, I've got this great idea. I need to put an awning up because, I'll use Chris Fox's example in Fox's Den. The awning fell down. It took him 18 months to replace the awning for permits and everything else.
Well, I know, and this is anecdotal, but this is true. I know
it's much easier to say no.
And I'm not going to say because they were scared to bring it up because they said as soon as you say something, you're a target. And that's just someone's perception. I don't know if it's true. But he had a box sign, and he said he changed the business, and all he had to do was change the name. So he just changed the insert. That's all he had to do was just change the name. He said he had to re-permit the whole thing.
Yeah, they have streamlined a couple of these things. I will say that. Like, signs are now just... It's an administrative approval process, but at one time those did have to go through the historic commission.
So, no, this wasn't in the historic district. This was on Forest Drive.
Oh, on Forest Drive.
Yeah. So my point is that it doesn't matter what administration you have because the I don't want to say bureaucrat because that has a negative connotation, but the department staff pretty much remain the same.
The historic people that are there, that this is the way we've always done it.
I'll give you an example. For example, when I was doing business in the county, did you know, and I'm probably really naive here, there are people, or at least one person, and I know that in New York it's a cottage industry, people who used to work for planning and zoning who no longer work there, but their job is to facilitate permits.
Yeah.
So that if you have a job, or you have a business that you want to open, instead of you going to planning and zoning or wherever you're going, it would take too long. So you pay this guy, and he fast-tracks it because he knows the process, he knows the people, and he can make it happen that much faster. So people are just saying, look, it's worth the money out of the hassle that I'm going to have to undertake on my own. That's crazy to me, and maybe naive, right?
Well, part of the problem with Annapolis...
And I don't know if Annapolis does that. I mean,
yes, they do.
Well, Mike Myron, I think, had a brief business where he was trying to do that. He was trying to be a consultant. But the biggest trap with Annapolis is there's no expiration date once you file your permit. So in a lot of municipalities, you go in, you file your permit, and they have to either approve it or deny it within 90 days. If they don't approve it, it's approved as is. So, or so many days. Sometimes it's 120 days. But the problem with Annapolis is that permit could sit on someone's desk and sit, and there's no expiration date for that permit, and they can come back and keep making you make changes over and over again. And so the other problem is you also have the...
But why would it sit? We'll come back to that, but why? Like, let's say, are they understaffed, or is it just that government mentality, or is that lack of a sense of urgency?
I don't know.
I just know, I mean...
That's a great question.
I mean, look at Pit Boys, and I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I mean, if anyone knows, Pit Boys is on Forest Drive. They moved from Chinquapin, and it took them the better part of 2 years to open. Now, I think there was a lot of that went into that with
there was some litigation with 7-Eleven next door that they went through, and they had to get that resolved.
But let's say that it wasn't. But what I'm saying is that if you're a small business to open, you need a cash flow of some sort. And for a permit to sit on a desk for a month or 2 months or 3 months, that is money that you're losing by not being in the game, and you're running out of capital. That is a desperate situation to a small business owner.
Exactly. And I tried to make that point at several meetings, and unfortunately...
Well, I think why? Well, let's throw it out there. City Council, there's only one person, 1.5, because Ian... He owns his own business, but he does work. He's quasi-government because he works for government. But Jared Lippman, he's the only one that I know that doesn't that owns a business entrepreneur.
That's not a government.
The rest are civil servants, and there's nothing against civil servants. My grandfather was, and but there's a different course of action. There's a different sense of urgency that's held by government entities than there are the private industry.
Right.
And if you're a city councilor and someone comes and says we have a huge problem with businesses trying to open. I remember reading an article a few years ago with Mayor Moyer. Someone's had this exact issue, saying we're trying to get these permits approved, and it's killing us. And the mayor was bewildered. She said, "Well, it's only been 6 months. What do they expect? We're doing the best we can." And I'm like, that is someone who's never worked in the private industry.
Right.
That's someone who doesn't understand that time is literally money.
I've made the proposal to somebody. I said, you know what you should do is make a documentary out of this. Just film everything, just to show the city staff so they can look at it and go, wow, I didn't realize it was that bad. And just basically keep a tally of how much you spent, how much your bank account is going down every day, and then when they look at it and go, wow, I didn't realize that this is what we're doing to people, because I think there's a complete disconnect.
Absolutely.
And that's the biggest problem. And I don't think anybody's there to explain it to them. And that's it's criminal.
Okay, so that brings us back to the AEDC. That was the Annapolis Economic Development Corporation.
Right, that was started by Josh Cohen.
Right, and I think there are models for that. There's one in the county right now that is leaderless. Yeah.
When he's not stealing panties out of his
allegedly. But I don't even know if that's successful. I know, because I would criticize the city, but I mean, just from experience, I'll tell you the county was not a whole lot better when it came to speed of permitting, what have you. But the AEDC, I thought was an abject failure. In my personal, the reason being was because it was quasi-government. If you're getting any funding from the city whatsoever, then you are going to be. I guess what it was they said, well, we're not going to. It's going to be a 401 or 401k, a 501c3, and so it was not subject to public information requests or what have you. I don't think it was by design. But they got their funding supposedly by the city, and then the other funding was supposed to come from private companies.
Investors and whatnot.
And from my
that never materialized.
It never happened except of in-kind donations, which was office space.
Right. You've got Alan Hyatt that donated the office space.
Right.
And then I know that the Lowe's had donated spaces for meetings and whatnot there. Right.
Well, let's dig deep into that. Who were the members on the board for that?
Well, you had Stuart Cohen, who used to own Peppers on Main Street. You had Reza
Jafari, yeah.
Yeah, Jafari. Was Doug Smith on that board?
No.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember who else was.
Chuck Walsh.
Chuck Walsh.
Mm-hmm. Those are the only three I can think of offhand.
And who are the biggest businesses in town? Were they involved?
No. I mean that'd probably be TCS and Maurice Jose. That would be. At
the time, John Belcher.
I mean, you've got the Naval Academy. You've got. Eric's not in town,
we really don't have a giant employer here.
No, we don't. Well, we don't have the space for it. I mean, we're a small town. I mean, you don't have. I would probably say TCS is probably the largest.
Well, but he was getting to a point, and that was.
I will say this: the biggest issue was there were a number of conflicts of interest, and you have to look at if you're going to be on a board for a nonprofit and you're expected to raise money, but you're on a nonprofit board for maybe a couple. Which one are you going to raise the money for? And that's the ongoing issue, is that there's not much money in town for these nonprofits. And
also, I mean, let's be honest. If you look at any of the boards of any of these organizations, they're all good people. We all know who they are, but they're all the same people.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same people on all the boards. So I just, and this is where I go back to any issues that the city's had with businesses. It's been the same people involved in all of them. Yep. It's the same. There's no I was going to say retaliation. Let's get them
diversity.
But no, it's not just diversity. But there's no ramifications for failures. And the ADC was an abject failure. The Market House was an abject failure.
Right.
These are all things that were there was serious mistakes made and a lot of money that was. I mean, if we look at the AEDC. And that was their budget was what, almost $500,000 a year.
$500,000, yeah.
Right. We don't even have computers to show us exactly what they did for those two years they were wiped out.
Well, they had to be. There was personal private information on those computers. There were things that, so for example, there was personal information for loans to guarantee loans, things like that, and you have to wipe those computers clean. It's just what you have to do.
Then what's their account? Well, I know their account.
I don't buy that, Sean.
I guarantee it.
I mean,
I know
you take the confidential information off of that. But I mean, what how do you justify the city giving them $500,000 a year for 5 years?
Was it 5 or 3? I think it was 3 years.
Well, Josh established them the first year of his office. He had 4 years in office, and Mike was the one that turned around and dismantled them. So it's got to be at least 4.5 years.
Well, my point is that we don't. I mean, that aside, we don't know what they did. We don't know what they accomplished. We don't even know what their goals were.
We don't know what was in the works. I mean, was IBM looking to move in here? We don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
but I think, and we'll say Sheila Finlayson had a great point when they dissolved them, and she took responsibility as an organization and said, our problem is that we never gave them any goals or metrics. We never gave them any direction.
Yep.
And she was 100% right. I look at. And let's get into it. The Main Street, which was the Main Street Annapolis Partnership, and now is the Annapolis Partnership.
This is so damn confusing.
So, but if we look at the problem that we have, if you look at AEDC, could it have worked? I don't know if it could have worked. I don't like the way it was set up. I just think whenever you have a quasi-government, they have 1 foot in the private industry, 1 foot in government, and the whole point of them being formed that way is that they weren't going to be subject to the interdepartmental fights and that Annapolis has.
Well, who's your boss? Who do you report to? And again, I used to own several travel agencies, and that was one of the big things. They said that we got commission from travel suppliers, but yet we also charged fees.
Right.
Well, I was like, so who's my allegiance to? Is it to my client that's paying me the $25 fee to ticket an airline ticket, or is it the airline that's giving me another $10 on top of that?
Right.
All right. So you and I were both, and I'm pointing at Sean. You and I were both on not the same time, ABA board. I was on there from 2003 to about 2010.
So you're responsible for that mess that you had to clean up.
I didn't do anything. And I tell you, I loved the ABA. Loved it. I we were not effective as a group, I think. I think the problem was I was on because my previous position, I had a business interest in the downtown, what they were doing downtown, and we raised money for some of the projects that we had. So what we did as an organization was simply we had a fundraiser, and the fundraiser was 90% of what we did. Right. But it was all the brick and mortar people, it was all the restaurateurs of downtown, yep. And it was all the shop owners. And then I got that bias. I mean, I live off the Forest Drive corridor, but I got that bias of business in Annapolis means downtown. It's hard for anyone, including myself, to expand beyond that and realize that downtown is actually a very small minority of the businesses.
Right.
They're just the very obvious businesses. But I always said, if we had an issue, we should call Mayor Moyer and say we want a meeting, and she should be nervous about that meeting, saying, what do they want to talk about? What do you think they want to talk about? She couldn't have cared less because we didn't have any clout behind us. I love the organization, but we never had that much clout. So if we had no one came to us and said, hey, we're having problems permitting, can you help us out? We couldn't do that. So I think, and then you guys took over, and you had a different mission, because I was off the board, and then you were board chair, and you guys had a different mission than we were on at the time. And I think you were working with AEDC at the time, or at least
from time to time we would partner with them on issues. When I first got in, the primary issues that we had to deal with were membership, growing the membership, getting people involved again,
which is always tough because anyone who was involved was downtown.
Right, and then letting people know that a healthy downtown will affect the rest of the town as well. So we wanted to be really inclusive citywide, and I think that we did a pretty good job of that. When I got it, when I took over, we had roughly 70 members. Yep. By the time I left, we had 140, so we doubled our membership.
Now we got to point out that Sean came in right after the recession, or probably in the middle of it.
In the middle of of just the disaster.
Matter of fact, I'll tell you what, you gave me in 2010, you gave me some of the best advice to give me perspective to what was happening. And I remember that there was a business downtown my wife loved, and it was a clothing business, and they're on Main Street, and they failed. Uh-huh. And I remember you and I were, I forget where we were, but I just said, guys, it's bullshit. Yet another business bites the dust, and it's the recession in the city. And you said, why would you say that? And I said, well, I mean, they collapsed. And you're like, of course they collapsed. They were carrying the same lines as the person next to them. They had too much square footage. They had no cash flow. I mean, and then you said, you can't blame every failure on a business during the recession on the recession. This is a business that would have failed in the best of times. And that made me think, actually, that we were too quick to point at outside factors when it came to a business failing.
Right.
And you came in the middle of that, and I think you had that perspective.
Yeah. It's interesting because you really get a new perspective when you dig into the details. For example, you may walk up Main Street, and there may be a bunch of empty storefronts, and you go, oh, Main Street's dying.
Which is what everyone does, including myself.
Right, but come to find out, there's probably pending permits on the vast majority of those places. So you may see, somewhere like between 10 and 15 open spaces, and the lease sign is still up there just in case those permits fall through, and at least the leasing agent has a list of names of people that were interested in that place, just in case it never opens, or the financing falls through, or something else happens. But most of those places are under lease already. They just haven't done anything yet, and that goes back to our first issue we talked about, right, which was the city sitting on its hands.
So you have a storefront that stays vacant for months, and people, I'm one of them, is that it's very easy for me to go through and count the number of storefronts and say, shit, there's 15 of them that are empty, the downtown is dying. And right. I think that probably would have been accurate in 2009, because there was nothing happening, and I think Harvey Blounder, everyone knows, would rather let a place sit empty than take less than he thinks it's worth. I'm not saying that's right or wrong.
Actually, he'll fill it. He'll fill it with merchandise now. He usually, and then leaves a lease sign up as well. So everything's always
t-shirts for everybody.
But they get it.
It's the old adage, right? Everything's always for sale, but I always the right price.
And I'll say that too, is that you can make fun of the t-shirt shops, but they're the ones who get it. They're open till 10 o'clock every night.
That's true.
Open. You can call. And I'm one of them who rolls their eyes, but they get it. They're open all the time. They're taking
until it's the night before your son's birthday, and he's dying to have that Crush Davis t-shirt, and it worked out.
I don't know, but I think everyone judges the health of city business by downtown, and I've got, but then I'll drive up Forest Drive, and you can see, there's been places that have been,
that whole Forest Drive corridor has really been revitalized, even from the old Forest Drive.
It's getting there,
way up there. I mean, you've got Sinfern Terrace up there at Old Forest and
Little San
Forest,
Salvador.
Solomon, all the way down here coming in. You've got the Little Italy, which was the Cha Cha Chicken. You've got the El Cabrito.
Which
you've
I freaking love.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Caliente up here, which is Caliente, which is like my new favorite to go to. I mean, she's picked up the catering at Quiet Waters Park.
And I've heard that
she's doing.
they just expanded.
Yeah,
they were open a year, and they expanded already.
And they're so I mean, you're seeing a little bit of a resurgence coming on down here. Rocco's Pizza is expanding next door.
Are they good?
Yeah, the dry cleaner left, so they're going to expand.
And then I heard that I was about to say Ulta, but it's not Ulta. Albi? Oh, is it Albi? It's that German grocery store.
Oh, Aldi.
Aldi, yeah. I think they're going to where CNC Liquors was, Yeah. So, and that's the rumor. I mean, that's...
Yeah, and then, of course, on upper end of Forest Drive, you've got the old MAIF building, the MAIF building, which is just absolutely huge, that something needs to be done. And again, it sort of goes back to business development there. That was another exit from the city that the city had no clue.
Right.
Nor did the Economic Development Corporation.
Oh, here's another one.
When R&R left,
you touched
it was like wait, what? They're not there anymore?
You touched on Pit Boys. Well, I noticed on Facebook. I'm friends with one of the folks that works there, or owners, and they're talking about how they're having a hard time getting their occupancy permits. And so I sent a quick email to the city saying, "Hey, what's going on here? Did you know anything about this?" The Economic Development Office, nope, didn't know anything about it. This is a business that's about to open, and you don't know anything about it.
Let's break that down then. Okay, so we have the how many departments do we have within the city? I get confused because there was 3 that I had.
There's probably like 9 departments, I think.
All right, let's take the county out of it, because I know that there's that supposedly that sort of symbiotic relationship between.
Mike and Steve Shu are all over these relationships, and I mean the fire department one just absolutely sucks for the city.
Yeah, but the business one. I mean, so let's go back to the business one. So we have economic development within the city, right?
That's in planning and zoning now.
Right. Well,
it's a weird that's a whole weird thing, and I'll call bullshit on this whole thing because Hollis Minor, who is she's splitting her time between the city and the county, and they're sharing a salary, and so she's doing economic development for the city and the county, which may or may not be a good idea. But what's interesting is that when you look at Downtown Annapolis Partnership now, you've got the president of their board, which is Doug Smith, who used to work for Hollis Minor as a consultant. And from what I gather, there was some bad blood there, and I mean, she's now somewhat reporting, or he's somewhat reporting, even though it's a separate board. But I mean that the Downtown Annapolis Partnership needs to report to Planning and Zoning vis-a-vis Hollis Minor.
Not really. I mean, it's supposed to be a separate organization.
It's supposed to be a separate organization. Okay, when Lisa, what's the old executive director that was here for 3 months and quit?
Thompson.
Lisa Thompson quit. Immediately, Pete Gutwald, director of Planning and Zoning, sent an email out saying, "Hey, do not do anything until we let you know what direction we want to go."
Yeah,
and I called Doug Smith on that, and I said, "What the hell is this bullshit?" And he said, "Oh well, they're investors. They have a say." I said, "I invest in Microsoft, but man, I can't call up Bill Gates and tell him that Windows 10 sucks." Yeah. At that point, I said, so the city is controlling that. I saw emails where when Lisa Thompson was here, she wanted to make color copies. She wanted 25 color copies espousing the benefits of the downtown partnership, Annapolis Partnership.
Right.
And had to get permission from Planning and Zoning to do it, and was denied 25 color copies because they didn't have the budget for it. Okay, so how are we supposed to keep businesses alive in Annapolis when you've got that kind of support coming from the city / a private entity? That's the thing that
she shouldn't have had to. She shouldn't have had to go to City Hall to make copies either. She should have had a printer, and apparently the person that was in charge of that, the person that was in charge of that, never bought her a printer, a lousy $100 printer, and that's
she doesn't.
These are the types of things that come to light, and you go, well, what are you guys doing? Who's running this show?
Well, we don't have an office for this downtown Annapolis partnership too. It's on the good graces of Herman Advertising and Marketing.
Right. Well, they have a physical office. I mean, that's where they are.
They do, but they're not paying for it. And I say that's great that Herman has offered them the space to do it.
Right.
And I think that's great. But But
are we in the same place? I mean, the fact that we're talking about that. I mean, we're talking about making copies. And we're forgetting the fact that there's people who are waiting for permits to be moved forward.
Right.
As we're talking about who makes copies and who doesn't. And that's where, if you look at the ADC, I thought, well, they were supposed to facilitate businesses so that if you open up a restaurant, you call them up and said, hey, I'm trying to get just a shitty little permit and I'm hemorrhaging money. And then they'd say, no, our job is to bring business to Annapolis. Well, then whose job is it to facilitate business in Annapolis?
There's funny you bring that up. There's a couple of things that I chaired the economic development transition team for the mayor and the city council after the last election, and what we wanted was an ombudsman. And I don't know if this ever...
That's it.
That's me clapping there, man, right there.
I don't know if that ever got funded. I know that I get so sleepy and I fall asleep during these debates. Council. And did they pull the funding for that? Because it was in
it's not there. I don't know that it's ever happened. But no. I totally agree with you. You need to have somebody that is, just a direct offshoot from the mayor.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, the mayor's water bill goes high, and he goes down the hall and says, "Hey, dude, my water bill's a little bit high." And I say, "Oh yeah, no problem. We'll take care of that."
But can you do that for businesses?
Which is fine.
Well, the beauty of this ombudsman though was two things. Number one is the person you go to and you say, "All right, I need this done," and they do it. But not only that, but you're going to find the stop gaps. If permits are sitting on one specific person's desk for way too long, and you're keeping a calculator of it, and you got this board up that says 46 days for this permit. Why is that still there?
Hey, Frankie, why are you sitting on these permits?
Right.
No,
and
they've only got 35 hours a week, so it's a little tough to move business forward, my friends. They're not machines.
But if you have that one person that can keep track of this and they start to see the bottlenecks in the process, then you look at it and you go, okay, the process is dead. This is an issue. So you can start to repair that. But until you can identify and pinpoint what exactly needs to be changed, you're not going to change anything.
They did it for the yacht club. The yacht club. The yacht club had to be up and running in a few weeks, and boom, there. I mean, and my point is, if you can do it for the yacht club,
true,
you can do it for everybody. You can. Why? I mean,
they bent over backwards to get them relocated. They bent over backwards to modify the liquor license.
I don't want to hear the shit. They're going, well, there were jobs at stake. They don't care. I'm not saying that callously.
No, there's votes at stake.
They don't care.
Well, I will say that the yacht club is a good source economic engine. Believe it or not, they have these regattas every week. There's two regattas, Saturday and Sunday. They usually have a regatta on Wednesday night, as we all know. They're famous Wednesday night races. So there is an economic engine.
But let's take a step back, and this is something that we had talked about before. The city has no skin in the game when it comes to business. So I don't blame them for their lack of a sense of urgency, because if that building is empty, if Blonder's building's empty or it's occupied, doesn't matter. Someone's paying the property taxes for that. So what do they care? And I don't mean this callously. I don't mean this logistically, as far as that they have a sense of urgency to get someplace filled. They don't care if it's filled or not, and I get that. I'd probably be in the same if I'm the mayor going, look, why should we expend all this money to move economic development forward when people are paying the property taxes, and as long as that money's coming in, why should we care? I get that.
Well, the companion to that, too, also is that you've got...
If there was a sales tax, if there was a city sales tax...
get 2% or something like that.
You can't do, but
right. But, the companion to that also is that you've got building owners that own a building that might sit there and say, hey, well, an empty building is a write-off.
True.
As opposed to
I don't know about that.
It's not
really the case. Yeah, this is the financial guy coming out.
The two non-financial guys, the guy who just got to $5 on his checking account, I'm nodding with that. Makes sense. Yeah.
Well, one of the biggest challenges.
You got $5?
$5.53.
Jesus,
that's not a lie, man. My wife called me yesterday. She goes, "I'm gonna need a check from you."
Tim, you forgot to carry the one. It's actually $2.
Ones.
But one of the things that you have to keep in mind is some of these properties have been passed down through family trusts, and the number of owners of just this one piece of property,
on downtown,
because it's been
everyone thinks it's Blonderville, and I know that's not true.
No, it's not. And in fact, a good example is whatever Reardon's is now. See, I still go by the old names of the places.
Harvest Woodfire Grill.
There you go. Okay. So Reardon's, at one time, there was a lot of different trustees to that one property, and what you found out was that Dana Florstano, I think his last name is, and he came in and he bought all of his relatives out so that he is the primary owner of that property, but he had to buy out all of his cousins and sisters and brothers. Wow. And so, but if these things pass down through family trusts over a period of time, think 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations, and then split that out with all of the relatives. I mean, think of your great-grandparents and all your relatives and owning a little bit of this building. You're not getting that much income from it. What are you getting? Maybe $1,000 a year. So are you going to miss it? Probably not. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is that we have these properties that are kind of like that.
All right, let's jump back to the organizations that we were talking about. So now we had MAP. All right, so the Main Street Annapolis Partnership, that was supposed to be, and that was
under Ellen Moyer,
and that existed for a long time, and that they had gotten they were supposed to get some funding. Some federal funding for that,
right? And that was Mary Giannini was running that at that time, right?
Well, the city has to fund a Main Streets program as part of your charter. The city has to fund a full-time executive director.
Now, just for anybody that's listening that may not know, the Main Streets program was designed as a result of the interstates, is from what I'm understanding, is that when the interstates
in the 50s,
when the interstates were built in, they actually bypassed main streets. And that was where the program came from. It said we needed to revitalize main streets, and I forget under which presidential administration
Eisenhower.
It was. Well, that was the interstate system, but when they realized that it was screwing main streets, I forget which administration it was,
Obama
established this Main Street Partnership, or Main Street Partnership, whatever, the Main Streets program.
Main Streets program
at this point.
To revitalize these true main streets. You look at Frederick, you look at probably
and
Cumberland,
I think from what I understand, it's pretty
and
successful in Frederick.
And they can be very successful. But that's the background as to why it was established.
All right, so back to what Sean was saying, that you're saying that in our charter, or it can't be in our charter.
Well, it's the state of Maryland. You have several levels to this. So the National Historic Trust actually runs the general Main Streets program, and then the state of Maryland runs all of the Maryland Main Street programs. And the state of Maryland will designate you a Maryland Main Street program.
Which means what? Which
basically means that that you get access to some resources that they have, on the national level and the local level, and which is key for a website probably.
Right.
And there are some people that work there, and they're helpful when you need them. And so, but in that requirement is you have to pay for a full-time director.
Okay, the city does.
The city has to fund it. Now I will say this, that when we were rewriting the bylaws the most recent time,
I didn't. So you got to go backwards. So this is you as president of ABA.
Well, I was
or the economic development.
former president of the ABA. Let's say that.
Okay.
And when we were rewriting these bylaws, more recently we found out that the economic development person, or the person representing the city, normally doesn't get a vote in a lot of these other Main Streets programs, but in the City of Annapolis, they demanded that they have a vote. So,
well, but who gets a vote?
In this case, Hollis does.
Well, no, but I mean, is it the board? Is it the Main Streets board that when you talk about a vote?
Yeah. There's a board of directors.
So it's sort of like our mayor having a vote, which is kind of which is strange too, from what I understand. Because we're in a strong mayor.
No, we're a weak mayor.
Oh, that's right. Because we're the city, but he still has a vote. So I mean,
he has a vote. Yeah.
But with a city manager, we're technically weak mayor. That's
But so usually what they do is they just say, okay, whatever your funding is, here it is, and they just give it to you, and that's it for the year. But Annapolis is operating a little different. They have to bill the city every month, and then the city approves it or denies it.
We always operate a little differently here
so
in
it's definitely run different than a lot of other places.
So the original thought with merging the ABA and the
Annapolis Partnership at the time.
No, it was Main Street.
No,
well, there was the Main Street, the Annapolis Annapolis Partnership,
right.
And the Annapolis Business Association decided to merge, and the idea came from basically a consultant that we hired.
Who hired?
The ABA, the Main Streets program, I think Economic Development Corps. We each put in $1,000. It was like 12 different groups. We put in $1,000, and the idea was that Griff Hall, who was the consultant, would come together and say, all right, what do we need to do to better business in Annapolis? Okay. And so he comes to us and he says, all right, so this is what people want. there's too many groups in the city. You got the Maryland Avenue Association, you have the Inner-West Street Association, you have the Chamber of Commerce, you have the Annapolis Business Association, the Main Streets Annapolis program, and all these different places. SOFO, I think, was even around at the time.
The Southern South Forest Drive Business Association.
Right. So there was a lot. There's a lot of different organizations. West Annapolis. I could go on all day.
Yeah. Well, let me give you just 20-second history on that, because what I understood is that it used to be you had the Annapolis and Anne Arundel Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
I don't know if that it was called at the time, but then you had Annapolis thought they weren't represented, so they formed their own business association.
Right.
And then West Street thought that they weren't represented, so they formed their own, et cetera, et cetera. So now we have umpteen of these business associations, all of which have diluted their clout and their power.
Right.
And they're very, very specific. Some are just a block long. And actually, if you haven't looked at what's going on in the paper right now, there's a big battle between the Annapolis and Anne Arundel Chamber of Commerce, who's now dropped the Annapolis from their name, and the other chamber associations in Anne Arundel County. It's all a pissing contest, and no one's looking at it.
A little bit of a power grab.
So anyway, back to what you were saying about the looted, all the splinter groups.
Right. So this consultant comes back, and basically what he did is he went out into the field and recorded notes from everybody that he interviewed, and the common themes that he was seeing he put down on this report. And one of them was, we just want to go to one place to get an answer. One person that can help us out. The other thing they said was it had to be separate from government. Because if it's we're the government and we're here to help you, we don't like that.
Right. And
so it has to be separate from government. And the other thing was it had to have representation from the stakeholders, the businesses that are actually in whatever this organization is, not some executive that is coming from a boardroom to a board meeting that doesn't really have feet on the ground. And so as long as we have that, we're happy. So I sat in the meeting and I said, you know what? This sounds great. The ABA could go away tomorrow as long as our programs are run. We ran Restaurant Week. We ran Midnight Madness. We ran, I think, a Spring Madness.
All which are wildly successful.
Yeah, these are basically signature events that bring people to town.
And they're all relatively new. They're all about 5 years old for the most part.
Midnight Madness has been around.
I'm sorry. Midnight. All right, Midnight Madness and even Restaurant Week goes back. But Restaurant Week.
That's about 5 years, 6 years. So it grew. All these events grew, and they had some panache to them. And I said, as long as the programs are run, because our whole idea was, let's put cash in cash registers. That's it. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to focus on. And then every once in a while, when there's an issue, let's defend the businesses if it's big enough. But we have to find critical mass, which we eventually got to a process for that. But what happened was, so it came to be known that we had to have a 501c3 to make this happen. So the idea was that the Main Streets program, which was the 501c3, we were a 501c6.
What's the difference?
C6 is like a membership organization, business organization. So think Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
And the C3 is your typical nonprofit. We do good things for good people, no matter what, more or less. And you have a mission, obviously. But that's in very general terms. And so if we merge these two together, we should be able to accomplish this. And we could hire a executive director who could spend the time in the meetings dealing with a lot of the issues, because I was volunteering a lot of time to this. And this one executive director could take on the role of both.
And the ABA had an executive director at one point.
That was before my time.
Yep. No, but we did.
Yeah.
It was lasted.
When you were president, I mean, you had the pure volunteer board and yourself a volunteer, and you had a super part-time sort of, I don't want to say a secretary, but
I would say an admin
assistant or something like that would do newsletters.
And thank God for her, because otherwise, I would have lost another 2 hours a day. So that worked out great. But what ended up happening in the end, and this is where things get a little murky, is we come to find out that basically the 501c3, if it's going to be the Main Streets program, has to be a designated district. And then if it's this designated district, it has to concentrate all the efforts on that.
Which meant...
And I talked to Shelley Reed, too, and she said that the other thing is that it has to be a contingent.
And Shelley Reed.
And she is the new executive director for the Downtown Main Streets Annapolis.
Downtown Annapolis Partnership.
Yeah. But it has to be a contiguous district. So West Annapolis, you're screwed.
It's ultimately what the two.
Forest Drive, you're screwed. Eastport, you're screwed. It has to be.
Yeah.
So you've got basically essentially Main Street. We'll say Compromise, Randall, Main Street, the two circles, and Maryland Avenue,
which is
probably, and West Street, and West Street out to probably Calvert,
which is probably a single-digit percentage of city businesses.
Right, and the other thing you got to keep in mind is that that's not what our original mission was. Our original mission was the Annapolis Partnership was going to be a citywide organization. We were going to do what we can to bring all these businesses together to work for a common cause. And after the fact, we come to find out either A, someone didn't know what they were doing. Because I'm not a Main Streets person, and that's not my background. I don't know these things. I'm just following the lead of whoever was
Main Streets, when this whole merger was going down, the Main Streets program was on hiatus, correct?
No, it was still around.
It was still around. Who was that? Was that Lisa Craig that was running?
Lisa Craig was the executive.
Pretty much
director.
she was like the chief cook and bottle washer for the Main Streets program, which was pretty much languishing, wasn't it?
Waiting to pull that out.
Huh?
You've been waiting to pull that out. Chief cook and bottle washer.
Chief cook and bottle washer, yeah.
She had an assistant, too, I think.
Okay.
That was helping her. I think there was some money funneled through that as well. So, but what we come to find out is that somebody either didn't know what they were doing or they were doing the ultimate bamboozle, right? They were trying to get access to the funds that the ABA had and the programs that we had, or they didn't do their job and they didn't know what they were doing. Right. And so when we look at this, and we had the mission, I mean, we wasted, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. We wasted a lot of time. We wasted a good year putting together this big Annapolis Partnership concept, and then in the end, come to find out, oh, you can't do that. We're just going to focus on this tiny.
I've got to say that. And we had this discussion when you said, hey, we got this great idea, we're going to merge. I said, man, Sean, that's got to be one of the dumbest fucking ideas I've ever heard. I just never saw the benefit. Well,
the problem I saw is that it was a reinvention of the AEDC.
You were selling the business community out to the city is what I saw.
And I will say, and I said that in the beginning of this conversation, is that the ABA has always been a paper tiger. There was never a point where the ABA had any sort of power or clout, and that was the problem.
Well, you said to me a long time, probably 5 or 6 years ago, that the business community needs to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Mayor, whoever you are this year, and the mayor's like, oh shit, what do they want? What do we need to do? How do we appease them? And that's just never been it.
Well, I would say that I had a pretty good relationship with Josh.
You can have a great relationship. But
when I called him and said we have to deal with this issue, he would usually deal with it.
I mean, if you look at the parking thing, we in last week's episode we were talking about crime, and we gave Mayor Panellini's a lot of credit for addressing public housing, and he has. Whether or not he makes any progress on it, he's at least addressed it, and he's tackling it right now. Is he any more pro-business? And you're right. They're not anti-business. It's not on their radar.
Right.
Is he any more pro-business than the others? And I'd say no. I mean, if you called him and said, I have a concern, but if he's going to call and fix his own water bill, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, would he do the same for any business in town that called him up or went into one of his open door meetings and said, hey, look, I don't have a grease trap. I'm not going to need a grease trap. Why are they requiring me to spend this much money on a grease trap? And he makes the phone call. Is that within his purview to do that?
You talk about grease traps. The Stuart Cohen's Business Peppers, which is on the corner of Gorman and Main Street.
Yeah, right next to Middleton's.
No, it's next to like White House Black Market or something, sort of across the street from Johnny's. What's the hoagie place?
Jimmy John's.
Jimmy John's.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're up on our downtown.
I was going to say it's next to the parking garage.
Have another beer.
But it's now it's a frozen yogurt place, and they needed to put in a grease trap. They cooked nothing there.
And that's where common sense kicks in. You go where's the business advocate to say, what do you look at this permit and say, what the hell are you asking them to do? We don't have that business advocate. The ABA certainly was never that business advocate, but could you have that? I mean, could you right now say, all right,
we testified at city council consistently.
No, I agree, but I mean, the city council, like I've said, they're all very nice people, but I mean, none of them are business owners, and none of them have worked in the private industry for the most part, with a couple of exceptions. They don't understand. I don't want to sound condescending, but they don't. Is there anyone that if you can have the yogurt guy call up in a panic, go, look, I've got a loan out. I've reached the end of my cash flow. I've got to get this freaking place open, and they want me to put in the goddamn grease trap.
And that has happened time and time again.
Oh my God, yeah. We can sit here for an hour and tell horror stories, and that's not. And I don't know if we're any different than any other cities. We're probably not. But then I think it's harder to do business in Annapolis than most cities.
I know many people that have just investigated doing business here that have decided not.
I would never open up a business within the city of Annapolis.
Great Paws Dog Wash. That's probably not their full name. It's Great Paws, but they were in West Annapolis. They had a small one of those little bungalows. Did a great business. Said, hey, gosh, we need to expand. Off to Eastport, they went to the Eastport Shopping Center. By the way, which is the only place I've ever known that has a McDonald's that opened and closed.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there was one up on West Street where Dunkin' Donuts was, too. That was a McDonald's, too.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
But there you go.
Well, so that's where we are.
But they ran in. They moved over into Eastport, and the city had changed the water connection fees or something like that, and ended up running like $125,000 over. They paid it. 6 months later, they were done.
All right,
they couldn't recover.
All right, so that's where we are. Is just that we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner, and to be honest with you, it was not that far of a jump. We've done this time and time again in the city. It's Gordian's knot. How do you unravel this? Like what?
All right, I got the perfect.
Here we go.
All right, now this is it. Now we go into the conclusion. Sean's got the perfect thing. This is exactly what we want to hear.
Well, I think a back door was left open last week when the Chamber of Commerce changed its name to the Anne Arundel County Chamber of Commerce. Well, now you left the door open for Annapolis Chamber of Commerce. You get the members of each of these organizations have a seat on this Annapolis Chamber of Commerce, SOFO, Downtown Annapolis Partnership, Inner West Street, and these are the presidents, and they run this new Chamber of Commerce. And that Chamber of Commerce fights for the businesses. And I think that if you could put something like that together, then it can work. I do think that you also have to have people that are actual stakeholders running these organizations. I mean, you have the president of the Downtown Annapolis Partnership who's never opened a business downtown. He's never worked in a restaurant or retail establishment that I know of. You've got people on the board there that's the same case.
Well, I've said that a number of times. I said, with any kind of a business organization, you need building owners and business owners.
Right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Government. Again,
your manager is a great girl or a great guy, but has no real business on there. Maybe standing in for you or something like that. But I think you need business owners and building owners.
Yes, exactly. And I think you have to have people that are in that district. If your district is restricted to that, then those are the people that probably should be on that board.
That's a brilliant idea with the Chamber of Commerce, though.
I think so too.
I mean, and we're going back to the future, or
the future
to the back, because there was the Annapolis Chamber of Commerce. It was the Annapolis
Chamber of Commerce at one time, and I think you have to have somebody out there fighting for the city. Now, I don't know if Bob and the Anne Arundel County Chamber are going to do that, if they're still going to, because they have guaranteed seats, board seats on some of these commissions, so. And they're supposed to be representing Annapolis at the same time. So there are a lot of moving parts, but I think if we could do that may be the first step.
But you know what bothered me is that after the ABA pretty much dissolved, and then there was they went back into bureaucracy, intentional or unintentional bureaucracy, where they had no voice. That the businesses in this city had absolutely no voice. There was no outcry about that. There was no one in the business community wailing and gnashing their teeth, and that just shows you that maybe there was a problem before that they thought that they are just corks on this ocean, that they don't have to worry about, or that whatever happens to them throughout this bureaucracy is just their lot, and it's a part of doing business. There should have been a lot of people pissed off, and there weren't.
It's also a delicate balance too, because I've heard there's some dissension among the troops about the leadership of the Downtown Annapolis Partnership.
Well, you can always
And in order to remove, a board member or whatever, it takes 100% of a vote of a 22-person board.
Well, I like Sean's idea.
No, it doesn't. You don't need 100%. I helped write the bylaws. It's a majority of the board.
But you know what? Let that.
Okay.
Let that go. Let the chips fall where it may on that one. Whatever happens.
The majority of the board that's there at the meeting once they have quorum.
Yeah.
Which could really, when you think about it, be 7 people.
But who's
probably is.
But who's going to vote? Who's going to put their neck out on the line to vote for that? Nobody's going to do it. So I mean,
you have to have some. Yeah, you have to have some pretty good reasons to do.
But this is part of Annapolis culture. What's exists right now is no different than we've had, whether it be the Economic Commission. I think Mike Myron ran that for a while. Mm-hmm. Nothing against Mike, but or the AEDC, is that it was all well-intentioned. You got to give it to the city for that. It was well-intentioned, but it was designed by bureaucrats for business owners, and that just doesn't work.
Exactly.
It doesn't. The city has no business in business. They just don't, because they don't get it. They don't understand it. It takes them forever to do anything.
Right. Well, I don't know whether we've solved anything.
I think we did, actually.
I mean, we certainly
said
brought
that jokingly
up.
last few.
I drank 2 beers.
No, you didn't.
I
You drank.
finished that.
There you go. No, 1.5. 1.5. Look,
Jesus.
mine's empty.
Yours is empty.
I've been licking my bottle
I
caps.
almost drank a 6-pack.
I think we did, actually. I mean, that to be honest with you, I perked up at the idea of Annapolis Chamber. I think
Annapolis
it's
Chamber of
freaking
Commerce.
brilliant.
Well, it'd be nice if, and in hindsight, you go back to this and you go, why did we dissolve the Annapolis Business Association? Because that's a 501c6. That could have fulfilled that role. And then you still have the Downtown Annapolis Partnership, or whatever it's called now.
And if it works, great. If not, who cares?
So it would have been a subsidiary of that. And then you could have had the basically this new chamber, or the Annapolis Business Association, still running Restaurant Week, because that was citywide.
Well, I know Tim and I have talked before about saying that with what I perceive as really sort of a debacle coming from the ABA into the Downtown Annapolis Partnership, that the businesses should reorganize as another ABA, which this is a perfect opportunity to do it with the Chamber of Commerce.
I think it's better because the ABA before was not that effectual. I mean, I think it was the nature of the organization. No. I loved my 7 years on the board.
Well, ABA also had a little bit of I don't want to say an identity crisis, but I mean, they were typically associated with downtown.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, for the most part. Whereas if you were to turn around and establish a new thing to the Annapolis Chamber of Commerce, that is all-encompassing. You're not going to get into the bullshit with Sheila Finlayson, like, you need to include Upper Forest Drive with Lower Forest Drive, and
exactly,
and everything else. It's like, no, if you're here's the line, here's the city limits.
Well, and let's be frank.
You're included.
The point of that also is that you have power in numbers, and you basically are telling the city council, going, if this is what we want, as far as cutting through the red tape, and if you don't do it, we have money behind us that we can get behind candidates who will. And it's ugly, but that's how it works. Is saying, if you're not going to do this, we know a candidate who will, and it only takes you about $2,000 or $3,000 to win an aldermanic seat in this town. It doesn't take a lot of money.
No, it doesn't take a lot of votes either.
All right, so Sean, get on that, and if by Monday would be great. If
okay,
we get this done.
Yeah.
Okay, you got it. Let me clear my weekend.
In the meantime,
do you ever think we'll see a business seat on city council?
No.
My thing is, I've always wanted to see a business seat, and I want one for public housing. 2 at-large seats.
Well, you elect
maybe
people,
even not voting.
You have to keep in mind, you elect people from the district that you're in. Now, if a district or a ward wants to vote someone that's a businessman in, then yeah, that's possible. But you're paying your property taxes by your where you live.
Yeah, I guess, but the logistical
But
problem.
businesses are paying property taxes as well, and they're paying a lion's share of that. And a lot of people don't live in the county. Okay, Jerry Hardesty, for instance, does not live in the city. He lives in the county.
He could move to the city and run.
He could move. No, well, what I'm saying is that, I mean, he's paying an awful lot of money in taxes,
sure,
on his buildings. Why doesn't he get a vote just because he lives in the county? I think the business community is such a viable part of the equation.
But we always fall. Water finds its own level. Is that all the businesses that I would look at, if you watch City Council, 85 to 90% of all City Council business is downtown. It has to do with Ward 1, has to do with businesses, has to do with City Dock. Almost everything, and that's where I look at the alderpersons in the other wards going, can you bring it back home a little bit?
Which is funny, because Rhonda probably has more in her district than anyone, because she's on that West Street corridor that includes the design district and then the warehouse district on the other side of West Street. Yeah, she probably has more.
You've got the shopping center and all the car dealers and everything
She
else.
has something. I thought she told me they had something like 750 businesses in her.
I believe it.
Alone. And that's the central business district for the city. The pretty business district is downtown.
All right, we're running out of time, so one thing I want to cover real quick before we end this is the mayoral election. We went from rumors of about 5 or 6 Democratic candidates for next year's election. So we're about 14 months away from the mayoral election. that now we have no one except for Gavin.
Well, we've got Gavin Buckley on the Democrats. And
No. We don't know if he's Democrat.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Yes, I do.
No, we don't.
I just talked to him last weekend. He's a registered Democrat. He's on the Democrats, and the Central Democratic Committee is not really behind him. That's
the problem.
They're actively looking for somebody.
He can be a Democrat, and he can be running. That doesn't mean that he's going to get their nomination.
You know the same thing back with
work for Trump.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's the same.
Why do you
thing
hate America, Sean?
Hold on, let me breathe heavy.
It's the same thing with Zena Pierre and Josh. When Zena and Josh ran. I mean, they were like, okay, well, she's a Democrat. We've got to give her a thing. And then it was like, oh, God, she won.
But Gavin has that thing because Gavin's been making noise about running for at least a year, and everyone kind of not snickered, but he wasn't on anyone's radar. And now I'm like, there's no one else that Gavin. I mean, we are of the mind that if Mayor Panalydes doesn't screw anything up between now and the election, he is going to win because he's not screwed anything up badly in the last 3 years.
He'll be a strong candidate.
I mean, believe it or not. I mean,
I think Gavin will give him a really good run.
That's what I'm saying. Is if you got,
Gavin has the name recognition,
and he's a businessman.
He's also involved with the arts, obviously.
But he's an Aussie.
Yeah,
some people find that sexy.
It's charming.
it's very charming.
Tell us more, Sean.
It's the American dream. So
Paul Hogan could run in this town and he'd win.
I think he could really give him a good shot. I mean, what did Mike win by? How many votes?
50.
I mean, it doesn't.
It's a pretty close race.
But that was. Yeah, but I mean, that was
in a city that's 80% Democrat or something like that. I mean, it's some crazy amount.
I saw that online poll on the Capitol. And I take that with a handful of salt because you can vote over and over. And they had Gavin winning. I think he had 70% of the vote. Mike had 30. Which surprised me because Mike is not unpopular. He's not wildly popular. I mean, he
has a chief Instagram officer that could have loaded up those votes.
But
well, think about that though. You actually need a grassroots movement to help you. And Mike has a lot of money in his bank account right now.
He does, $1.25.
So he could hire a grassroots movement.
And you got to give him credit. I mean, he won the last. You can say what you want. I mean, it was kind of a fluke. There's a bunch of things going on that was odd in that election year.
That now that Annapolis has been saved.
but if you look at but this year, all things being equal, he is a Republican. But I mean, he's not unpopular. I don't think.
No, he hasn't. If he can hold Crystal Spring,
he's got to stall. He's got to stall that. Until after the election, that's
he'll be fine. If Fawcett doesn't absolutely fall through on his...
I heard his interview on the Annapolis podcast, which you guys ought to check out. It's great. But last week or 2 weeks ago, and he said, well, there's a rumor going around that I'd stop the Crystal Springs. He did say it. I mean, there's
there's no rumor.
There's no rumor.
Oh, there's no rumor,
we've got the video.
You're not going to backpedal, but all he's got to do is stall that till after the election, and he's golden. But I mean...
My favorite part on that podcast was when he was sitting there talking about how if he won a second term, that he would serve his 4 years and probably go back into private just because it was such a sacrifice salary-wise to come being the mayor. Yeah, that was kind of my...
that's pretty good money being mayor of Annapolis. Looks good on LinkedIn.
I didn't know Capital was paying them.
I was like, okay, well, you work for Vocus for 3 weeks before you're resigned,
All right, we solved everything tonight. I think we're going to move this on to the Ebb Tide, right?
Hey, we did this with crime too, Sean. You're one side of this thing. We're another side, and if you will, not even opposite sides.
We're the armchair people who just make sweeping conclusions.
Who do we talk to? Who do you think can give us another insight to some business in the city? I mean, Shelley is one that comes to mind.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Shelley is the new executive director, and I think she's got some history with the Main Streets program. She can talk about that and some of the inner workings. Might as well have Doug Smith on.
Right.
He's the president of the Downtown Annapolis Partnership. That would be pretty good. And who I always, believe it or not, is interesting is Bob Burden, if he's willing to do it.
Bob owes me $10, so yeah.
Oh, from that pool?
I like Bob.
No, so he really has a lot of knowledge. He's been in that position a long time. But I also like to see boots on the ground, the people that are actually fighting the fight.
Who are not on any of the boards.
Yeah, like Andrew Fox, he's opened a number of restaurants in town. Right. He can talk you all about the permit process. He's had some that have actually gone very well, where he's had some disasters, but he's had some restaurants that they opened pretty quickly. So
Mission Barbecue opened pretty quickly.
That did. Yeah.
It's amazing what Under Armour money will do for you.
Is that what happened? I don't know much about it.
Yeah, no, actually, the guy that owns Mission was like, I believe he was the roommate in college for Kevin Plank.
Oh, nice.
And when he left, he said, I'm looking to open a barbecue joint. And said, okay, well, dude, I'll give you a check. And then the rest is history because M&T Bank jumped up behind him. And now they've got, 25 locations in, 15 states. And, that's that. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah, it's a good time.
We do have to go. We have reservations, don't we, at the Ebb Tide?
Ebb Tide. It's it's not karaoke night, but it may turn out to be that way. So in the meantime, you can find us on the web at themarylandcrabs.com and then on Twitter at MDCrabsPodcast.
Yes, he got it twice in a
row.
Nailed it.
And John's at Annapolis on Twitter. I'm at Tim Hamilton 47. And then on Facebook, find us at the Maryland Crabs page and the group. Do them both because we're checking them both out. And then you can post comments, suggestions, break us apart. You can take Sean apart, which is awesome. And then subscribe to us on iTunes and leave a rating and a comment. Those are very, very, very important because it boosts us up in the rankings and their algorithms. And then recommend us to friends and enemies and relatives and everyone else.
And if you want to bitch at Sean, do you want to tell people how to bitch at you?
Sure, I have a Twitter.
Just show up at the next in the vein of
I have
boo the guy off the stage.
Right. I have Twitter.
I do have.
I tweet on it.
I like once a month.
I send some tweets.
Is that good? Yeah.
So what is it?
It's at Shauno 21401.
And that's the Irish Sean.
Yeah,
not the Trailer Park Sean.
Yeah. It's SEANO 21401.
And you can find any of this on Facebook. I think it's.
Yeah,
we'll friend you. Yeah, I'll friend anyone. I don't care. There's this hot girl from Russia that founded. Off air. We'll do this. But all right, Ebb Tide.
That's it. Ebb Tide.
All right,
Cheers.
Sean. Thank you, my friend.
Cheers.
Okay.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.